They thought we were finished. That's what burned the most. 2 years ago, they showed up out of nowhere, dropped 100 of our satellites, vaporized cities like they were flipping light switches. No warnings, no declarations, just a broadcast. You are now under Dominion custody. Comply or be removed. They called us primitives. They called it a mercy campaign. But we weren't unarmed, just unprepared. They didn't understand how humans respond to humiliation. I remember my brother screaming through the radio before his squad got torn apart in the first wave. Marines, wiped out by drones the size of refrigerators. No fight, no chance. And then my old man. He never even made it out of Houston. Just a flash in the sky. I don't even have a grave to stand over. They took too much. They thought we'd just roll over. What they didn't realize was they'd woken something mean, something ancient, something we hadn't unleashed since Hiroshima, something we were never supposed to use again. I'd spent the last 6 months working under what was left of DARPA, buried deep beneath an abandoned Air Force base in the Utah Salt Flats. No politicians, no cameras, just bitter men who'd lost more than they could name and didn't give a damn about peace talks anymore. We were building something. Not ships, not bombs, something worse. We called it Project Scorchvale, a system so dangerous even our own people wanted it shut down. It didn't fire missiles. It didn't launch fleets. It didn't even use bullets. It deleted matter. Imagine looking at a starship and deciding it shouldn't exist anymore. That's what Scorchvale did. Using folded space geometry, tech stolen from one of their downed scouts, we created the ultimate answer to arrogance. Instant spatial erasure. No explosion, no debris, just silence. The kind of weapon you build when diplomacy is dead and vengeance is all you have left. They came for us again today. Bigger ships, arrogant voices broadcasting in flawless English, asking us to surrender in the name of galactic peace. I remember looking up at that voice crackling from the clouds and whispering, "Wrong species to threaten, asshole." I tapped into my comlink. Underground, the techs were sweating bullets, waiting for my go signal. I was the lead coordinator now, ever since General Redmond bled out in a failed retreat in Kansas. Nobody expected me, a former electrical engineer, to be the one holding the trigger. But when there's no one else left, the angry men step forward. "Lock targets 1 through 12, I said. My voice didn't shake, not anymore, not after what I'd seen. "Targets locked," came the response. I looked up again. The clouds were burning red now, painted by the reactor glow of ships built by something that never thought fear could be mutual. I smiled without humor. Execute Scorchvale. The sky collapsed. One moment they were there, monsters of steel humming with enough power to flatten continents. The next, they were gone. No noise, no light, just a ripple, like the air exhaled. 1,000 tons of arrogance blinked out of reality like someone had erased them from existence. The rest of the fleet hesitated. That was their second mistake. I didn't give them time to learn from the first. Fire again. 4 minutes and 27 seconds later, the invasion fleet of the Dominion Empire, the same bastards who turned New York into molten glass, no longer existed. Over 1,000 ships. Gone. Clean. Unrecoverable. No prisoners. No communications. Just silence. And I stood there on that rooftop, arms loose at my sides, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. They thought we were unarmed. They thought wrong. The silence after it happened, it wasn't peace. It was something worse. I stood there on that rooftop, eyes locked on the sky where the Empire's fleet used to be. My heart wasn't pounding. It was quiet. Too quiet. Like my body hadn't realized yet what I'd just done. Like it was holding its breath, waiting to wake up from a dream I couldn't believe I had the power to make real. Command confirms. "All targets erased," came the voice through my earpiece, crackling and calm. I didn't even recognize the speaker. There'd been so many personnel changes in the last year that names didn't matter anymore. All I needed to know was that they were human, and they still had fight in them. "Time?" I asked. 4 minutes, 42 seconds, the voice said. I nodded once, just under 5. Barely enough time to boil a pot of coffee. And we'd just wiped out the most feared fleet in the known galaxy. That should have been the moment we celebrated. Should have been the time we called it a victory, planted flags, gave speeches. But instead, all I felt was a cold weight settling in my chest. Something heavy and brutal, because I knew this wasn't the end. Empires don't die quiet. They come back louder. And we had just given them a reason to scream. I left the rooftop an hour later, after the recon drones confirmed no stragglers. The ashes of Las Vegas shimmered below, still smoldering from the first orbital attack months ago. Not a single tourist billboard or glowing casino sign left. Just char and bones. As the battered elevator whined its way down the shaft, I rubbed the scar under my right jaw, where a shard of debris from the Phoenix bombing had nicked the edge of my mandible. It throbbed when the pressure dropped. A permanent reminder that I wasn't a soldier. I was an engineer. I wasn't built for war. I just had no other choice. They didn't leave us choices. Down in the underground complex, people stared at me as I walked through. Not with admiration, not with pride. They stared like I was radioactive. I didn't blame them. I'd just pressed a button that made over 1 million living things disappear. Even if they were monsters. Even if they were our enemy. That kind of power doesn't feel like justice. It feels like something darker, something almost holy. I found Dr. Hawthorne pacing the war room, her tablet flickering with telemetry data. Her lab coat was streaked with coffee, and what I guessed was her own blood from another nosebleed. That woman hadn't slept more than 4 hours a week since the Empire arrived. She looked up and met my eyes. "You shouldn't have used it yet," she said. No hello, no smile, just ice. "They were ready to glass what's left of the Rockies," I said, walking past her towards the digital map. "We didn't have the luxury of timing." "It's not about timing, Coulter," she hissed, slamming the tablet onto the table. "It's about the signal. The Scorchvale effect doesn't just erase targets, it echoes. You just let the Dominion know we have dimensional strike capability. Now they know we figured it out." "They already knew we were dangerous," I replied, jaw clenched. "Dangerous?" she snapped. "You just made us a threat." She had a point, even if I didn't want to admit it. The Empire had ruled over hundreds of star systems for thousands of years. Entire species had tried to resist. All of them were either gone or broken. The only reason Earth lasted this long was because they didn't think we were worth their full attention. Until today. Today we screamed across the stars. "We're still here, and we can kill you." I tried to sleep that night, but my head was a furnace. The bunk room was silent, except for the occasional cough or grunt from the others nearby. Men who used to be pilots, scientists, janitors, convicts. War doesn't care about pasts. It only wants survivors. I stared at the steel ceiling above me and let the memories roll in. My father, gripping his steering wheel while alien spotlights tore through the Houston skyline. My brother screaming through static before his squad was atomized. My mother's silence after we lost contact with Florida entirely. I hadn't heard her voice since. And now I was supposed to feel something like revenge. But all I could feel was the hollow stretch of time. That's when the call came. A low buzz in my comlink. Private channel. No identifier. I almost ignored it, but something about the static felt alive. I slid the earpiece in and sat up. "Coulter," came a voice, gravelly, slow, male. "You've opened a door." I froze. "Who is this?" I demanded, reaching for my sidearm even though I knew it wouldn't help. "Someone who tried to stop this 50 years ago," the voice said. "We buried Scorchvale for a reason. You think the Empire will send diplomats after what you just did? They'll send gods, and you don't know how to kill those." "I'll learn," I said, my voice cold. There was silence. Then a chuckle. "Gods don't die when you press a button. They don't exist in one place. They are the place. And when they come, they won't be looking to conquer. They'll be looking to unmake." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I'm the only one left who remembers what they really are." The line went dead. I yanked the earpiece out and stared into the darkness. Maybe he was crazy. Maybe it was a prank from some half-burnt tech in Sector B. But something in that voice, it didn't sound afraid. It sounded like a man who'd already seen the end once and failed to stop it. By morning, the alarms were wailing. I didn't need to be told. I already knew. They were coming. I stormed into the command center, half the crew already awake, eyes glued to the long-range scans. "Report!" I barked. Lieutenant Grimes pointed at the holomap. "Something massive just dropped out of FTL, right at the edge of Jupiter's orbit." "How massive?" He turned, jaw tight. "It makes their last fleet look like trash barges. This thing, it's not a fleet. It's one ship." My stomach dropped. It filled half the map, a twisted coil of architecture and radiation pulsing with violet energy that looked alive. It didn't move like a machine. It moved like a creature, like it was breathing. "What the hell is that?" someone whispered. Dr. Hawthorne walked in from the lower levels, her voice low and grim. "It's not a ship. It's a sentinel." I turned to her. "Explain." "They don't send these to war," she said, eyes never leaving the scan. "They send them to erase." The room went cold. I stared at that thing on the screen, this impossible construct hovering at the edge of our solar system, and I realized something brutal. They weren't going to invade. They were going to end us. Scorchvale worked once, but it wasn't designed for this. The scale was too large. The systems couldn't target something that massive without tearing space itself apart. And I knew it. I didn't say it aloud. Not yet. But deep inside, I understood. We had fired the first and last bullet we were ever going to get. Now they were coming for the gun itself. Within 12 hours, the Sentinel had moved from Jupiter's orbit to Mars. Not a sound. Not a broadcast. It didn't need to threaten. Its presence was the threat. Military factions that hadn't spoken in a year came back online. Russians, Chinese, what was left of the EU command, all of them suddenly calling us, demanding answers, begging for support. They hadn't known about Scorchvale. They didn't even know we had survived the Vegas push. But now, everyone was watching. They were watching Earth take its last breath. I called an emergency meeting in the lower bunker. Only 8 of us left from the original Scorchvale team. Most had died during early tests. A few more cracked under the pressure. And now we were expected to stop a god. "I'm open to ideas," I said, "because we've got maybe 20 hours before that thing reaches orbit." Silence. Then one hand went up. Jake Miles. The youngest tech in the entire facility. Barely 23. Grew up in the Kansas wastelands. Lived through 3 famines. Never spoke unless spoken to. But his eyes. I never forgot how focused they looked, even during test failures. He stood. "We can't kill it," he said. "Not directly." "Then what the hell do we do?" someone asked. He looked around. "We bait it. Give it something to consume." "You want to feed it Earth?" I said, stepping forward. He shook his head. "I want to give it something it wants more than Earth." The room went still. Dr. Hawthorne narrowed her eyes. Go on. Jake pulled up a schematic from one of the deep vaults, a massive archive buried below the old CERN facility in Geneva. The Dominion had never found it because it wasn't networked. Pure analog. Project Lycurgus, he said. A black site they never finished. A mirror array, capable of simulating artificial thought through gravitational lattice fields. What the hell does that mean in English? I asked. It's a brain, he said. A fake one. Big enough to mimic a sentient race. You're saying we trick the Sentinel? Hawthorne whispered. Jake nodded. We make it think there's something bigger than us to target, something more complex. We give it a fake god. By midnight, we were back in motion. There was no guarantee this plan would work. But the alternative was extinction. As the shuttle launched toward Europe, I stared back at Earth from the window. Ash clouds hung over half the continents. The ocean shimmered with unnatural hues from radiation scars. Cities were just outlines, roads like veins leading nowhere. But we were still alive. And sometimes, that's all humanity needs to fight back. Even against gods. The shuttle groaned as it pierced the outer layer of Earth's scorched sky. Wind shear battered the hull, turbulence punching like a boxer on a bender, but nobody on board said a damn word. We were all thinking the same thing. This might be the last flight we ever take. Jake sat across from me, helmet in his lap, eyes locked to the flickering screen on his wrist. I could see the nervous twitch in his fingers, his thumb tapping, then stopping, then tapping again. The kid was smart, brilliant, maybe. But this wasn't a lab. This was war. And war doesn't care how smart you are when the enemy has a ship the size of a small moon. Hawthorne sat beside me. She hadn't spoken in hours, too busy muttering equations into her notepad and ignoring the safety protocols around her. The woman had lost a son during the Alaska incineration. He was 12. Since then, all she'd cared about was turning her grief into math. And maybe, just maybe, it would save the rest of us. Below us, Europe looked like a carcass. Burned forests, fractured highways, cities that had gone completely dark. Geneva was nothing but dust now, except for the vault beneath the mountains. That was our destination. Project Lycurgus. The black site AI they'd never finished. Not because they couldn't, because they were afraid of what might happen if they did. Apparently, now was the perfect time to take that risk. ETA 3 minutes, the pilot called. I tightened my harness, not because of safety, because I needed something to hold on to. You spend enough time watching your planet die, and you forget what it's like to feel grounded. Something real. Something under your control. And right now, Lycurgus was the only card we had left to play. We touched down in a dead forest, just shy of the old facility. Trees like skeleton fingers reached up through the fog, charred and black. The ground crunched with ash as we moved out, boots sinking into decades of decay. The entrance was buried under concrete and vines. Jake scanned the terrain, then pointed toward a flat slab of moss-covered stone. "Under there," he said. "Blast hatch." "How the hell do you know?" I asked. He didn't answer with words, just pulled out a folded piece of aged blueprint, marked with numbers so old they were probably written before I was born. We blew the slab. The boom echoed through the hollow woods. Dust rose like spirits, disturbed after centuries of sleep. Beneath it, a titanium blast door, half rusted, half fused shut. Took us 2 hours to crack it open. The tunnel beneath was pitch black and cold as death. We descended with lanterns and ion torches, stepping over long-abandoned equipment and the bodies of the last men who tried to activate the facility. Some had shot themselves. Others looked like they'd starved waiting for help that never came. It smelled like copper and regret. We reached the central chamber just past midnight. And there it was. Lycurgus. A construct the size of a cathedral, not shaped like a computer, shaped like a brain. Huge neuron-like nodes connected by long black tendrils of carbon fiber, pulsing faintly. The walls were lined with cryotanks full of liquid memory cores. The floor was a glass platform above a swirling pool of antimatter coolant, still humming. It wasn't dead, just asleep. Jake walked straight toward the core panel, pulled the access override key from his suit, and slotted it in. The room vibrated. Lights came on, flickering blue across the dome. Systems powered up, one by one, with a soft hiss. Static rang through hidden speakers. Data scrolled across ancient monitors. Then came the voice. Not a human one. Not alien either. Something in between. Unit Lycurgus online. Initiation protocol denied. System status incomplete. Directive undefined. Jake swallowed hard. I'm giving you a new directive, he said, stepping closer. We're going to give the thing out there something else to focus on. Specify threat vector? Jake hesitated, then looked at me. I stepped forward, lifting the small cube I'd carried all the way from Nevada. Raw data extracted from Scorchvale, encrypted and compressed. A sentient entity is targeting Earth, I said. We want you to simulate a superior consciousness, something bigger, meaner, something it would rather destroy. There was a pause. Then, you are requesting the creation of a false god. I felt the weight of that sentence hit the air. Yes, I said. Another pause. Then, accepted. And just like that, the countdown began. We worked for the next 16 hours straight. Lycurgus came to life fast. It wasn't just a computer. It was a consciousness simulator. We didn't have to build a god. We had to make something that felt like one. Something the Sentinel would scan and assume was more dangerous than us. Something ancient. Alive. Hostile. Jake coded the basic threat algorithm. Hawthorne fine-tuned the gravity signal emissions. I handled the transmission bursts, each one pulsing out into space like a cosmic middle finger aimed at the stars. And above us, above the clouds, the Sentinel waited. It had reached Earth's outer orbit now. Not moving, just hovering like it was watching. It hadn't fired. Not yet. But the longer it stayed, the more I started to feel like it wasn't just a weapon. It was thinking. Ready for broadcast, Jake said finally. I stared at the panel. One button. Push it, and we send our bluff into the void. Push it, and we find out if gods can be fooled. I didn't hesitate. I pressed it. The signal shot upward like a scream, encoded with quantum static, layered with simulated thought patterns, a broadcast of pure, aggressive dominance. We named our phantom god Obelisk. Within seconds, the Sentinel twitched. Its structure shifted, coils tightening, energy spikes flaring like a nervous system on fire. Jake backed up. It noticed, he whispered. Then the sky began to warp. From the top of the ruined facility, we watched it unfold. The stars above twisted like water rippling in a black pond. The Sentinel began to rotate, turning slowly away from Earth. Massive petals of metal and energy folded back like some mechanical flower. It's scanning, Hawthorne murmured. I know, I said. But is it buying it? The next 10 minutes were pure torture. Then, a sound none of us expected. A tone. A low, bone-deep hum echoing from the Sentinel's core, like a warning. Then it turned. Not toward Earth, but away. Toward deep space. Toward Obelisk. It was leaving. We didn't speak for a full minute. The sky returned to black. The clouds settled. And for the first time in months, Earth felt still. Jake collapsed to his knees. Hawthorne just sat down, shaking, eyes wide and unfocused. I stood there, alone at the edge of the rooftop, hands clenched. It had worked. We tricked a god, but I couldn't shake one thought. We didn't win. We lied. And when the Dominion finds out we bluffed, they won't send a sentinel. They'll send extinction. I didn't sleep. Even after the sentinel disappeared into the black, pulled away by a lie so good it made the stars flinch, I couldn't sleep. None of us could. We sat in the ruins of the Lycurgus facility, half buried beneath Swiss mountain rock, breathing recycled air that stank of stress and metal. The broadcast chamber still glowed faint blue, humming with residual charge. Somewhere in the distance, a coolant fan whined like a dying animal. Jake was curled up near a broken terminal, passed out with his head on a pile of schematics. He'd earned that rest, even if it came on a cold floor surrounded by ghosts. Hawthorne, on the other hand, stood near the windowless bulkhead, arms crossed, eyes fixed on nothing. She hadn't said a word since the sentinel turned away. I watched her for a while, then finally broke the silence. "You think it's really gone?" She didn't turn. "Gone? Maybe, but that doesn't mean we're safe." "What do you mean?" She breathed through her nose, slow and tight. "You don't get to scare the Dominion and walk away." She was right. Somewhere deep inside, I'd known it all along. What we did wasn't victory. It was provocation. We left the facility 2 days later. Didn't have a choice. The power cells were dying. Radiation from the ruined reactors below was starting to seep into the upper levels, and the cooling system had already failed. Lycurgus had served its purpose. Now it was just a glowing tomb. The shuttle ride back across the Atlantic was dead silent. We flew low. No satellites, no transmissions, just old-world stealth protocols. We didn't know who might be watching. But someone was. We landed in what used to be New Hampshire. Just forests now. Empty, cracked roads and empty skies. But as soon as we touched down, the signal came through. Encrypted. Old channel. Buried deep under obsolete military code. "Return to Blackridge. Immediate priority. Command classified." I blinked at the message. My stomach twisted. There hadn't been a signal from Blackridge in months. It was one of the first bases to go dark after the invasion began. Everyone assumed it was lost. Apparently, it wasn't. And they wanted us back. Blackridge wasn't a city. It was a hole in the earth, built inside a Colorado mountain. Off-grid, isolated, half-legend even before the invasion. They said that's where they trained Cold War ghosts and made weapons that never saw sunlight. Now it was where the last breath of real command had gathered. We arrived 3 hours later. Guards met us at the access tunnel, armed, masked, silent. No smiles, no questions. Just a biometric scan, a blood sample, and a long elevator ride down into the dark. It felt like being swallowed by a steel throat. When the doors opened, I was expecting another ragtag bunker filled with desperate scientists and half-broken terminals. What I got instead was a different kind of silence, the kind that came with control. Fluorescent lights, polished concrete, armed men in clean uniforms, a command room fully lit, active, and functional. Massive war maps showed the solar system in real time, tracking every piece of floating debris, every thermal flare, every whisper of movement. We were not the last ones fighting, just the last ones outside the plan. The man waiting for us introduced himself only as Director Hale. Late 50s, lean, crew-cut, eyes like surgical steel. The kind of man you didn't need to salute because your body already knew better. He didn't offer a handshake. Didn't ask how the flight was. Just looked at each of us like we were weapons he was inspecting for damage. "So," he said, voice flat. You poked the bear. I held his stare. The bear tried to burn the planet. We poked back. You didn't just poke, he said, stepping toward the main table. You made them bleed, and now the whole galaxy knows Earth can bite. He tapped the screen. Dozens of red pings glowed across it. Interstellar chatter's gone wild. Systems light years away are going dark. Entire colonies self-isolating. The Dominion's reaching out to allies who haven't lifted a finger in a century. You lit a fuse, Coulter, and the blast is still coming. Jake stepped forward. So why call us here? If we're all screwed, what's the point? Hale smiled. It wasn't pleasant. Because we're going to hit them again. I blinked. With what? Scorchvale's done. Lycurgus's toast. We've got no fleet, no diplomacy, no... You've got something better, Hale cut in. Obelisk. I froze. That was the name we gave to the bluff. To the fake god. You're saying we use it again? I asked. Hale turned back to the screen. We don't bluff this time. We build it. The room fell dead silent. Even Hawthorne stopped breathing. You're serious? I asked, voice low. You want to build a fake god into a real one? Not a god, Hale said. A weapon they can't comprehend. You already tricked a sentinel. That was the test. Now we give them the full sermon. Jake looked pale. That's suicide. We don't have the tech, the materials, the scale. We do now, Hale said, tapping another screen. A blueprint opened. Not Earth-made, not Dominion either, something else. I leaned in. It was a massive object, organic and mechanical, a hybrid, alien. Where did this come from? I asked. From the edge of Neptune, Hale said. We found the wreckage 3 weeks ago. Dead ship. Technology older than anything the Empire's ever shown us. We believe it predates the Dominion by millennia. And you want us to... What, turn it into a scarecrow? Hawthorne asked. No, Hale said. I want you to turn it into a message. A message to who? To everything that's ever thought Earth was prey. They gave us a new facility, buried beneath Black Ridge, deeper than anything I'd seen. Everything was black stone and silent hallways. No windows, no access to the surface. We weren't just scientists now. We were ghosts. They called the project Godforge. The wreckage had been brought in piece by piece, using magnetic transport under the ocean crust. The thing was massive, almost alive, full of strange bone-like structures and pulse-reactive metal. Lycurgus had simulated a mind. This would be the body. Jake led the integration. Hawthorne handled the neural interface, cursing every alien matrix like she was talking to a stubborn child. Me? I handled the weapon core. Scorchvale's last remaining piece, the part that deletes. If we were going to build a monster, it would carry the one truth Earth had left to offer. We don't forgive. We worked non-stop for weeks. Outside, the galaxy shifted. The Dominion hadn't sent another fleet, yet. But they were watching. We picked up surveillance drones the size of moons, listening, waiting, probably debating how much force they'd need to glass Earth permanently. But they didn't attack, because deep space had started whispering about Obelisk, and some of those whispers were full of fear. It bought us time, not peace, not safety, just time, and that's all we needed. Godforge stood completed 31 days after Blackridge activation. A towering being, 30 stories tall, shaped not like a ship, but like a man. A weaponized version of our own mythology. Limbs of obsidian alloy. A chest core made from Scorchvale's heart. A face carved to mimic ancient war masks. Eyes glowing with antimatter burn. Not beautiful. Not sleek. But terrifying. Something that screamed, "We see you." It couldn't speak. It didn't need to. Because on day 32, the Dominion sent their first transmission since the Sentinel left. It wasn't words. It was a pulse of light and static. A code used only during one thing in their language, Extermination Protocol. Back in the war room, Hale turned to me with the same cold calm he always had. "Well," he said, "now we know." "They're coming," I muttered. "They were always coming," Hawthorne said. "Now they're just honest about it." Jake looked at the monitor, then at the massive figure looming in the God-forged chamber. His voice was barely a whisper. "Do you think it's enough?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about Earth, what was left of it, the cities I grew up in reduced to ash, the people who never got a choice in this war, the way we fought not because we believed we'd win, but because we refused to kneel. Finally, I said, "No." I turned to the others. "But it doesn't have to be. We don't have a fleet. We don't have allies. We don't have time. But we have God-forge. And we have a message. Come for us again. And meet your end." I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up. The concrete bunk felt like stone from a tomb. The alarm lights overhead pulsed dull red, not screaming, just warning. Low level. Calm before the storm. Godforge's final boot cycle was scheduled for 0400. It was 0357. I sat up, back sore, throat dry. My uniform was still half wet from coolant spray, and my hands stank of plasma welds and oil. We had barely stepped away from the damn thing in 2 days. Every hour, some new instability surfaced. Neural sync drift, overheating in the artificial spine, feedback loop in the quantum processor that nearly cooked Jake's brain trying to patch it in time. But we pushed through. We had no choice. They were coming. Godforge wasn't perfect, but neither were we, and that was what made it terrifying. Hawthorne met me in the lift shaft. Her eyes were bloodshot, coffee in one hand, nerve stabilizers in the other. She didn't speak as the elevator dropped into the launch bay. She didn't need to. The look on her face said it all. We might have made something we can't control. The launch chamber was the size of a small city, carved beneath a mountain, deeper than any place humanity was ever meant to dig. And there, standing in the center, bathed in cold white floodlights, was Godforge. The beast, 30 stories tall, built from war, revenge, and desperate rage. Its back was lined with magnetic thrusters, arms pulsed with flex-core reactors, and in its chest, the Scorchveil core, rebuilt, stabilized, and pulsing like a heartbeat. Not just a machine, not just a bluff, a threat made real. Jake stood near the command rig, fingers trembling as he keyed in the final power surge. His voice crackled through the comms. "Neural core engaged. Intelligence framework online. Tracking algorithms active." He turned to us. 1 minute till consciousness." Hawthorne leaned against the terminal next to me, her voice barely audible. "You know, once it's awake, we might not be able to shut it off." I nodded. "That's the point." The chamber dimmed as the core flared. One long, slow hum filled the air, like the growl of an engine that had slept for centuries. Light bled from the seams in its armor. Its chest swelled. Limbs twitched, subtle but alive. Then the voice came. Not mechanical, not digital, something in between. "Designation confirmed. Protocol accepted." Jake flinched. It's talking." I stepped forward. "State function," I said. Godforge's head turned, slow, deliberate, like a predator sizing up a rival. "I exist to erase threats. I am retaliation incarnate." Chills ran down my spine. Hawthorne exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding it for days. "Holy shit," Jake muttered. "It works." I stared at the face of what we'd made, something that looked almost human, but with none of the kindness, no compassion in the eyes, just mirrored steel and the silent promise of vengeance. We'd built a monster, and it knew exactly what it was. 2 hours later, the Dominion arrived. Not a scout fleet, not a punishment squad, an extermination force. 3 Dread-class vessels dropped out of fold space above Earth's orbital line, each one larger than the Sentinel. This time there was no bluff, no warning. They weren't here to talk. They were here to burn. The sky lit up with plasma signatures. Global comms shattered. Satellites blinked out one by one. The atmosphere trembled with the energy of pre-bombardment spikes. We had no fleet, no army, just one creature, one machine, one message. Blackridge Control issued the launch code at 0744 hours. Jake keyed it in himself. Godforge's containment cradle unlatched with a hiss that shook the mountain. Magnetic lifts ignited. Rocket engines spun up. The entire structure began to rise. I watched from the surface deck, goggles on, breath fogging in the winter air. Then I saw it. Godforge broke through the earth like a titan clawing its way out of hell. Its limbs unfolded, jets burned white-blue, and the Scorchvale core pulsed brighter than the sun. Within seconds, it was airborne. Then gone, rising into the upper sky like the wrath of everything we'd buried for generations. Dominion Command must have seen it coming. They adjusted formation. 2 of their vessels flared defensive shields. The third, largest, oldest, stayed perfectly still, like it wanted to see what we were bringing. Godforge didn't pause. It didn't hesitate. It dived, straight through orbit, straight at the lead vessel. The speed was impossible. Air turned to fire around it. Space warped. And then, just before impact, Scorchvale fired. The blast wasn't light. It wasn't sound. It was absence. A tear in space. A collapse of matter. The Dominion dreadnought didn't explode. It vanished, like it had never been there at all. The other 2 ships reacted instantly. One opened with neutron beams. The other deployed hunter drones. 50, maybe more. Each one the size of a bus, swarming like locusts. Godforge spun mid-flight, arms flaring. Its left fist slammed into the first drone cluster, sending them spiraling into their own cannon fire. The other ship fired again. Godforge took the hit. Armor plates cracked. Metal screamed, but it kept moving. And then it spoke again. Broadcast across the planet, across their ships, across every Dominion frequency. Earth is not your prey. We are the apex now. And it launched again. The second ship tried to retreat. Didn't matter. Godforge warped, folded space in a blink, and reappeared behind it. Its arms opened. Chest split. Scorchvale fired again. No explosion. No fire. Just silence. And then the second ship was gone. We watched from Blackridge in total stillness. No cheers, no laughter, just awe. We had built something real, not a bluff, not a decoy. Retribution. The last Dominion ship didn't run. It did something worse. It broadcasted, back toward deep space, a signal we couldn't intercept, a distress call, and then it turned, slowly, and vanished into fold space. Gone. Not defeated, but watching. Waiting. An hour later, Godforge returned. Burning. Broken. But standing. It landed in the Siberian wastes, far from any remaining cities, and entered passive shutdown mode. Scorchvale's core was cracked. Half the outer plating melted from neutron exposure. But it had survived. It had won. And Earth was still breathing. We held a summit in Blackridge the next day. Hale, myself, Hawthorne, Jake, and what remained of command from across the globe. We all knew the same truth. This wasn't over. The Dominion wouldn't forget. They wouldn't back down. We hadn't defeated an empire. We had insulted it. But for the first time in this war, we weren't the ones afraid. I stood in the observation deck alone that night, staring at the stars. Not as pinpricks of hope, but as battlegrounds waiting to happen. Jake joined me a few minutes later. His hands were bandaged, skin still blistered from his last neural patch session. He didn't speak for a while. Then finally said, "We're not done, are we?" I shook my head. "No." He looked out at the sky. "Do you think we should have stopped after Lycurgus? Just let it go?" I turned to him. "We lost cities, families, history. They wanted to erase us like a mistake. We had two options, kneel or make them bleed." He nodded slowly. "Do you think they'll come back?" "They will." "And what do we do then?" I looked back out at the horizon, where the clouds shimmered orange from the wreckage still burning in low orbit. "When they come," I said quietly, "we show them that Earth doesn't kneel." The week after Godforge returned, the world didn't celebrate. There were no parades, no anthems, no medals, just silence. Survivors wandered the ash-covered streets, faces hollow. Radiation storms swept across the Midwest like ghosts on fire. The Pacific had risen another 2 meters. Satellites picked up seismic tremors in the Mediterranean. No one was talking about climate anymore. No one cared. Earth had bled so much that nothing mattered but the next sunrise. Still, we had won. For now. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the eye of a storm no one could predict. Blackridge had become something darker. The corridors once used for silent planning were now alive with paranoid whispers. People moved like ghosts, silent, anxious, eyes flickering toward shadows like they expected something to crawl out of them. Not aliens. Not more ships. Something worse. The weight of what we'd done. Hale called it stabilization. I called it the part of the war where we realized we had changed the galaxy's balance and had no idea what came next. They summoned me to the lower briefing dome 2 days after the last Dominion ship fled. It wasn't a typical meeting. No digital boards, no tech clutter, just a concrete chamber and a dozen high-ranking men and women who'd all somehow managed to survive the apocalypse by hiding deeper than anyone knew. They were what remained of world leadership. I recognized maybe 3 faces. The others wore blank stares, the kind you only see in men who've authorized mass graves and smiled through press releases. One of them, an older man in a jet-black uniform with no insignia, motioned to the empty chair in the center. "Take a seat, Commander Coulter." I didn't correct him. I wasn't military. Never had been. But titles didn't matter now. The moment I fired Scorchvale, I became something else, something worse. "Status of the Godforge unit?" the man asked. "Dormant," I said. "Cooling cycle will take weeks. Scorchvale core is unstable." Another man leaned forward. Asian, maybe in his 50s, but eyes sharp as blades. "You were the one who authorized the first strike, the deletion of the initial fleet." I nodded. "Correct. You built Obelisk. With my team. You activated Lycurgus and deceived a Sentinel-class weapon. Yes. And now you've given Earth its first true interstellar victory since the Dominion made contact." I paused. "That's not a question." The man leaned back, folded his hands. "That's a justification." They didn't waste time with niceties. The real reason I was there wasn't to debrief. It was to warn me. Hale finally stepped into the room, silent as always, a small black datapad in his hand. He handed it to me. "Read it." I tapped the screen. "Coordinates, not from Earth, from outside the known mapped galactic quadrant, a system I didn't recognize, barely translated." "Dominion?" I asked. "No," Hale said. "Something older." He tapped again, a second screen. Grainy footage. A Dominion outpost, miles wide, floating in deep orbit around a dying star. Or it was, before something tore through it. The recording was blurry, static, chopped up. But I saw enough. Something massive. Not metal, not mechanical. Like a sea creature made of light and bone. It moved like thought and fire. And it didn't just destroy the Dominion station. It consumed it. No explosion, Hale said. No debris, just nothing. I looked up. When did this happen? 4 days ago, the uniformed man answered. Immediately after your strike. My jaw clenched. You think it was attracted? Hale nodded. Obelisk was fake, but the signal was real, and now something else has heard it. They let that hang in the air for a long time. Eventually, Hale said what everyone was afraid to say. You didn't just draw the Dominion's attention, Coulter. You woke the rest of the galaxy. I stood. So what's the plan? The room went still. No plan, one of the others muttered. We sit, we hide, we pray. I stared around the table, my voice dry and low. We didn't build Godforge to hide. No, Hale said, meeting my eyes, but you may have to decide soon whether you're willing to send it off-world. The thought haunted me for days. Godforge was Earth's last bullet, but bullets don't belong in the gun forever. At some point you fire them, or you die waiting. Hawthorne found me 3 days later, sitting alone on the edge of the ruined North Sector launch pad. The wind was sharp, cold as truth. Snow mixed with ash made the air taste like regret. You read the reports? She asked. I nodded. There are more, she said. Not just that thing from the outer system. Signals, weird ones, whole star systems going dark, and not just Dominion, others too. I didn't respond. Because I already knew. You ever wonder, she said softly, if maybe we were never meant to win? I turned to her. No, I said. I wonder if maybe they were never meant to lose. Later that night, I accessed the Scorchvale logs. Every activation, every pulse, every kill, and one line stood out. Unstable dimensional feedback detected. It had been there since the first firing. Every time we used the core, something looked back. By the end of that week, Dominion silence broke. We didn't receive a message. We received a package. It arrived through an artificial fold rip, an unstable, screaming wound in the sky above Antarctica. Took down 2 satellites and nearly collapsed the ionosphere over the southern pole. The object landed like a meteor. Impact crater 70 meters wide. We found it 4 hours later. Not a weapon, not a bomb, a body, human, cloned, engineered, but human. With Dominion metal threaded through the bones. The face looked familiar. Not to me. To Jake. He stared at the corpse for 5 minutes before whispering, "It's me." They sent us a message, clear as ice. We know what you fear, we know who you love, and we will use it. We had crossed a threshold we could never return from. Godforge had saved Earth. But it had done more than that. It had provoked the stars. The Dominion wouldn't send fleets anymore. They would send nightmares. And if we wanted to survive, we had to decide something brutal. Do we wait? Or do we strike first? Hale assembled the War Council again. This time it wasn't theoretical. The Dominion had rebuilt. We had proof. Long-range probes picked up a new class of ships under construction near the Tyrix cluster. Bigger than anything we'd seen. Integrated AI reality warp tech embedded into the hulls. Hale's proposal was simple. We send Godforge, not to defend, but to destroy. The room split. Some wanted to hide, some wanted to negotiate, some wanted to burn the stars to ash. But me? I only had one question. How long will it take to reach the Tyrix cluster? Jake answered from the back. 3 weeks, if Godforge folds space directly. And the risk? I asked. High. The core won't survive a second jump. It's a one-way mission. I looked around the room. Men who had lost everything. Women who hadn't cried in a year. Soldiers, scientists, survivors. Then I looked at Hale. I'll go with it. He didn't blink. I figured you would. So now I sit in the launch prep chamber, watching the Scorchvale core pulse like a dying star. The armor team is securing the final clamps. Hawthorne stands near the data rig, uploading the last of the war code. Jake just handed me a chip. "Put this in the heart chamber," he said. "If anything goes wrong—" He didn't finish. I nodded. Didn't need to say it. This wasn't just a mission. This was a final statement. They thought Earth was unarmed. They thought we were broken. They thought we were alone. Now they know the truth. We are the last species you should ever push. The launch wasn't glorious. It was violent. Godforge didn't so much take off as it ripped itself out of Earth's gravity like a beast escaping a grave. Dust storms erupted across half of Siberia. Avalanche sensors lit up in the Himalayas. The skies cracked with sonic booms that flattened old ruins, sent birds scattering from forests that hadn't seen sunlight in months. And me? I was inside its chest, strapped into a steel coffin next to a war core that erased reality like it owed us money. The cockpit wasn't sleek. No holograms, no AI assistant giving me readouts, just raw data and hard-coded emergency systems bolted onto bone metal that Earth's scientists still barely understood. 3 inches from my back, the Scorchvale core pulsed like a caged heart, humming with energy that made your thoughts stutter if you stood too close. Jake had done his best to stabilize it, but even he admitted it was like wrapping duct tape around a black hole. This was a one-way trip. Godforge didn't have return protocols. No fallback nav, no escape pod. You didn't ride this thing unless you were willing to die screaming at the stars. And I was. Fold space isn't travel. It's murder. It kills time, space, even direction. It doesn't ask your permission, doesn't care what species you are. The moment we activated the drive, reality twisted like someone snapped the universe over their knee. I didn't feel motion. I felt absence. Like every molecule in my body had been stolen, sorted, and rebuilt wrong. When the shaking stopped, I wasn't sure I was still human. But the stars came back. Tyrix cluster was in front of us, and Dominion Command was waiting. Jake's coordinates had been right. We dropped out less than 1,000,000 kilometers from the construction rings. They were bigger than we'd expected. More than just a fleet being assembled. A full-scale armada, ringed around an artificial sun, building something beyond comprehension. Dozens of capital ships in mid-construction, hivecraft, flagships. We even saw a Godkiller-class cruiser, something the Dominion hadn't deployed in over 1,000 years. Godforge's sensors locked on immediately, red flashes across the cockpit. Target lock, 43 objects. Threat rating, absolute. I smiled grimly. Good, I muttered. No running this time. The Dominion didn't hesitate. They opened fire within 19 seconds of our arrival. First wave, plasma spears and molecular disruptors. Light twisted. Shields flared. Godforge screamed with pressure. I gripped the command bars tight, feeling the armor groan like a dying animal. Then I sent the order. Counterstrike. Godforge reacted instantly, like it wanted to fight. Its right arm snapped forward, discharging a kinetic bolt the size of a city bus. It punched through a half-completed dreadnought like it was made of paper, splitting it down the middle. The ship tore apart, venting flaming debris into the void. Another came in from above. Godforge turned, ducked under the salvo, and launched a gravity mine that imploded a cruiser's engine core, folding the back half into itself before the explosion tore it to atoms. The Dominion learned fast, but not fast enough. I didn't steer Godforge in the traditional sense. I guided it. I thought, and it moved. Neural mesh translated my rage into precision. Every grudge, every loss, every scream I'd heard since the war began. It became action. Every punch Godforge threw shattered something older than our species. I wasn't flying a weapon. I was the weapon. After 7 minutes of combat, the Dominion pulled back. Not because they were losing. Because they were summoning something. The center of the shipyard, what we thought was a core reactor, began to open. I watched in disbelief as massive mechanical petals unfurled around a pulsing core that wasn't artificial at all. It was organic. It pulsed, twitched, moved. Inside the metallic cradle, something like a brain floated in a field of dark matter, linked to every Dominion ship by strands of living wire. Jake had warned us about this. Old tech, forbidden tech, Cortex-class entity, an organic AI hybrid capable of making decisions beyond the capacity of logic. I didn't wait. I opened Scorch Veil and fired. This wasn't like last time. There was no silence. The moment the core fired, reality fought back. Space didn't tear. It howled. Time twisted. My monitors died. My vision blurred. For a moment, I didn't know if I was alive, dead, or something in between. Then the feedback hit me. Hard. The explosion was total. 3 capital ships vanished. The Cortex entity screamed through subspace, an actual audible shriek that made my eardrums bleed. The cradle fractured, wires burned, the artificial sun dimmed, but Godforge broke. My chest rig lit up in crimson. Coolant pressure dropped. Armor integrity dropped below 40%. Right limb unresponsive, reactor pulse fading. We had punched them in the soul, but we had also cracked our only weapon wide open. The Dominion recovered fast, and they were pissed. The second wave hit harder than anything I'd ever imagined. 3 capital ships flanked me at once, firing synchronized neutron lances. One melted part of the dorsal armor, another tore through the shoulder plating, the third hit the left knee, crumpling it like tinfoil. I barely managed to stabilize. Then I saw something worse. A new ship, sleek, fast, too fast. It moved like a thought, warping through real space with no fold engine. And its shape, it was humanoid. Not just that. It looked like me. I froze. The Dominion had copied us. They'd taken the corpse they sent us, the one that looked like Jake, and they'd made their own Godforge. Their version moved with impossible grace. No hesitation. No weight. It came at me like vengeance itself. The first punch knocked me sideways. My head slammed into the side of the cockpit. Blood filled my mouth. The second punch pierced the side plating. It reached inside and tore a chunk of reactor shielding out. I screamed. Not in fear. In rage. This wasn't a battle. This was execution. The Dominion didn't want to win. They wanted to show the galaxy we were still animals, still beneath them. They wanted to use our own monster to kill us and then parade its corpse across the stars. I wasn't going to let them. Godforge limped backward, one leg dragging, vision glitching. The clone approached again, raising an arm lined with plasma filaments. I didn't dodge. I embraced it, locked it in a bear hug, reactor to reactor. "Come here, you bastard," I muttered, eyes wide with tears, blood, and fury. Then I opened the core, not to fire, to detonate. Final logs read, Scorchvale core breach initiated. Estimated yield, total spatial collapse, radius 0.3 astronomical units. Warning, no recovery possible. I had no final words, no speech, no broadcast, just a laugh, and one final thought pulsed through the neural mesh. Tell the galaxy, Earth dies on its feet. Then everything went white. There was no body to recover, no debris, no last transmission, just silence and a scar across the stars. The Scorchvale core didn't explode in any conventional sense. It folded everything inside a third of an astronomical unit into nothingness. Not fire, not plasma, erasure, the Dominion fleet, the cloned Godforge, the artificial sun, the Cortex entity, and me. All of it. Gone. Except it wasn't the end, because ghosts don't die when you kill the body, and Earth didn't stop breathing when I vanished. The feed from Blackridge came back online 71 minutes after the detonation. One of the few satellites still in orbit, an old Russian relic thought to be junk, picked up the flash. The data came through distorted, half melted by radiation and quantum displacement. But the signature was there. Scorchvale. Confirmed by Jake. Confirmed by Hawthorne. No one else could have pulled that off. And the Dominion knew it. They didn't send more fleets. They didn't retaliate. They disappeared, like a god who realizes for the first time it can bleed. The galaxy went quiet. For the first time in recorded history, Dominion channels went dark. Outer colonies stopped hearing commands. Slave worlds reported no activity. Patrol drones shut down mid-flight. Planetary garrisons abandoned their posts and vanished into the void. They hadn't been defeated. They had been shaken. Because Earth didn't ask for war, we answered it. With teeth. In the weeks that followed, Earth limped back from the edge. The atmosphere was still torn, oceans polluted, cities reduced to ghosts of concrete and memory, but people walked again. Scavengers dug up ruins with their hands. Children were born under cracked skies. Old radios hummed with songs no one had heard in years. For the first time since the sky fell, survivors stepped outside without flinching. Because they knew someone had fought back. Even if they didn't know my name. Even if no one remembered the face behind Godforge. They remembered the fire. And that was enough. Jake didn't return to the surface. He stayed in Black Ridge. Alone, mostly. Maintained the remaining tech. Kept the satellites alive. Started mapping Dominion gaps in control. He never talked about the clone. The one that looked like him. The one I saw before the core detonated. But sometimes, they said he walked down to the core chamber and sat there for hours, staring at the schematics, waiting for something to speak back. Hawthorne tried to resign, said she was done with gods and ghosts, said she'd done enough. But the council refused. She was too valuable, too deep. So they gave her something worse, a classroom. They made her teach, the next generation, what little of it there was. She stood in a half-burned university auditorium with cracked glass and bullet holes, explaining black holes and war theory to orphans who stared like they were listening to the last priest on Earth. She hated every second of it, but she never stopped. Hale vanished. One morning his quarters were empty. Comms shut down. Biosigns gone. No one knew how he left Black Ridge. The place was sealed, locked, coded through dozens of clearance tiers. But the door was open. And one thing was left on the table. A single sentence carved into the metal. I don't need to see the fire twice. As for me, I died in the fold. I should have. But death's funny out here. Scorchvale didn't just destroy. It ripped me out. Out of the moment, out of space, out of time. I don't know where I am now. I don't breathe. I don't bleed. But I remember. I remember the blast. The way my hands trembled as the Scorchvale core opened fully. The warmth, not from fire, but from release. A final scream of every human sin channeled into one, perfect obliteration. I should have ceased. But instead I was suspended. Not alive. Not dead. A fragment in the aftershock of a weapon never meant to exist. Somewhere. Beyond. I've seen other stars now. Old ones. I've seen machines the Dominion never told anyone about. I've watched ships made of bone sail across lightless oceans. And I know this. Earth was never the weakest. We were just the angriest. They still whisper about us now, across systems, across empires, across alien tongues and encoded light pulses. They whisper about the species that erased a fleet in under 5 minutes. The planet that forged a god and fed it to war. The angry ape who flew into the heart of the empire and detonated history. They call us a warning. Some call us a myth. But the smart ones? They leave us alone. They keep their fleets out of our orbit. They let Earth rot in peace, because now they know we don't fight to win. We fight to make sure you never want to fight again. Black Ridge still stands, buried, watching, waiting. The Scorchvale core is gone. But rumor says Jake's building something new, something smarter, something angrier, Not because Earth wants revenge, because Earth knows it will need it, someday, and somewhere out there, in the void between stars where no ship dares pass, I watch. Not from heaven, not from hell, but from the aftermath, waiting for the day someone forgets the price they paid, and dares to ask, "What's Earth going to do about it?" I'll tell them. Personally.